door was already closed when I realized nobody inside planned on leaving alive. That's how these things start. Not with shouting, not with guns out, just a room where the air goes tight and everyone suddenly understands the math is wrong. I sat still, hands open, listening. 3 men across from me, 1 behind me. That makes 4 problems, but only 1 decision maker. I knew which one it was before he spoke. I always do. Power never announces itself. It waits to see who flinches first. This meeting wasn't supposed to happen. That's the first sign. When people call you in quiet off hours, no witnesses, no paperwork, it means they're either scared of what you know or afraid of what you're about to do. I hadn't done anything yet. That bothered them more. "You've been busy," the man across the table said, not an accusation, a test. I looked at him long enough to make the silence uncomfortable, then I nodded once. "Busy don't mean reckless," I said. The man behind me shifted his weight. I felt it through the floorboards. He was nervous. Nervous men make noise when things go sideways. The one across from me didn't blink. That's not what I heard. That's the second sign. When rumors start moving faster than truth, somebody's feeding them on purpose. I leaned back slow. Let them see I wasn't trapped, even if I was. "Then somebody wants you looking the wrong way," I said. "Question is who?" Nobody answered. That told me everything. This wasn't about something I'd done. This was about something they were planning and didn't want me in position to interfere. I'd seen it before. Different streets, same playbook. You don't kill the man who's loud. You try to isolate the one who sees patterns. Because once the board is visible, the game's already over. The man across the table finally smiled. Not friendly. Strategic. "Let's say," he said, choosing each word careful, "things are about to change in this city." There it was. Change is what people call violence when they want to sound reasonable. I tilted my head. "Change costs money," I said, "and blood." "Sometimes," he replied. "Sometimes it just costs silence." That was the moment I knew. They weren't asking me to help. They were asking me to stay still while the ground shifted, and I don't stay still. I stood up. The man behind me reached for something he didn't need yet. Another mistake. Fear always shows its hand early. "I'll tell you what's gonna happen," I said, calm as church on Sunday. "You're gonna go forward with whatever foolishness you've convinced yourselves is control, and it's gonna work for a minute." I stepped closer to the table, close enough for them to smell the truth on me. Then people start disappearing. Not loud, not clean, just enough to make your soldiers nervous. Your money late, your allies quiet. The smile across from me faded. "You threatening us?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said, "I'm explaining the weather." Silence fell again, thicker this time. Outside, somewhere far off, a siren cut short, like someone thought better of calling for help. I turned toward the door. Nobody stopped me. That was the third sign. They thought they still had time. They didn't know I'd already seen the next 3 moves. They didn't know betrayal was already in motion. And they definitely didn't know who had just chosen the wrong night to test my patience. By the time that door opened again, somebody in that room was going to wish they pulled the trigger early. And somebody else wasn't going to make it to morning. By the time I hit the street, the decision had already been made. Not by them, by the city. You can feel it when the air shifts, when conversations shorten, when doors close a half-second faster than usual. Harlem doesn't warn you with words. It warns you with rhythm. That night, the rhythm was off. I didn't go home. That would have been predictable. Predictable gets you boxed in. I walked 3 blocks, cut through an alley I knew better than most men knew their own kitchens. Let the night settle around me. Somebody was following, not close. Smart enough to keep distance, dumb enough to think I wouldn't notice. I stopped at a newsstand that wasn't open. Old habit, reflected the street in the glass. Saw him plain as day. Young, too clean, shoes wrong for the block, not sent to kill me, sent to learn. That told me the meeting wasn't the play. It was the probe. I kept walking. When I turned the corner, he didn't. Good. He was learning the right lesson. I ducked into a barber shop that stayed open late for men who paid in cash and didn't ask questions. Sat in the back chair without saying a word. The barber didn't ask my name. He already knew my face. He locked the door behind me. Word's moving, he said quietly. Word always moves, I replied. Who's pushing it? He hesitated. That hesitation cost him later, but not tonight. People from downtown, he said, and some new money, quiet money. New money always thinks it invented power. I nodded. Anybody nervous? He laughed without humor. Everybody. That's when it clicked. Fear hadn't started yet. Anticipation had. That's worse. When people expect something bad but don't know where it's coming from, they start making preemptive mistakes, tightening circles, cutting out allies, trusting the wrong voices. That's how empires crack. I stood up. Close early, I told him. Tonight ain't for business. He didn't argue. Outside, the block had gone still. Not empty, still, like a held breath. I crossed the street and felt it then, eyes from a window I hadn't checked in years. Someone watching who wasn't supposed to be there. That wasn't random. That was someone cleaning loose ends. I changed direction, quick but not rushed, down a side street, past a church. Into the shadow of a building that should have been abandoned. It was. A door opened before I knocked. Inside, the room smelled like old smoke and fresh worry. 2 men waiting. Both loyal, both scared. One of them bleeding from the knuckles like he'd already tried to solve a problem with his hands. They're moving pieces, one said, cutting off supply, pressuring your people. I held up a hand. I know, I said. The bleeding man swallowed. Then why'd they let you walk? Because they think the storm hasn't started yet, I thought. Because they think they still control the calendar. I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Who flipped? They looked at each other. That was answer enough. The name came out low, careful, like it might hear us. A man I'd fed, protected, elevated. Betrayal always wears a familiar face. That's why it hurts less than people think. You expect it eventually. I closed my eyes for half a second, long enough to choose mercy or precision. I chose timing. Don't touch him, I said. Not yet. Both men looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He's selling you out, the bleeding one said. I know, I replied. That's why I need him comfortable. Comfort makes people sloppy. I walked back toward the door. Before leaving, I stopped. By morning, I said, they're gonna think I'm cornered. And you, one asked. I smiled just enough. I'm building the corner. Outside, somewhere nearby, a car backfired. Too sharp, too deliberate. I didn't turn around. If they were already taking shots in the dark, that meant panic had set in early, which meant somebody higher up had just realized the mistake they made letting me walk out of that room. And when powerful men realize they've miscalculated, they don't correct it quietly. They overreact. That was fine with me, because overreaction leaves fingerprints, and I was about to start collecting them. Somebody was going to move first. They just didn't know I'd already decided who. By sunrise, the city was lying to itself. Stores opened like nothing was wrong. Men shook hands they didn't trust. Phones rang twice before anyone answered. That's how you know pressure is building, when everyone's pretending the ground isn't warming under their feet. I sat by a window that gave me 3 angles and 1 exit, coffee untouched, watching patterns instead of faces. The man who flipped was due to make a delivery that morning. Same route he'd taken for years. Same confidence. Same mistake. Consistency gets you killed when the rules change. I didn't go near him. Didn't need to. I watched who didn't show up. 2 drivers missing. 1 lookout late. 1 message that never arrived. That told me the squeeze had started. They were testing loyalty in real time. Pressuring people quietly, offering protection with one hand and consequences with the other. Classic. But here's what they didn't account for. Fear spread sideways faster than orders moved down. By mid-morning, word reached me through 3 separate mouths that weren't supposed to know the same thing. Someone downtown had promised safety. Someone uptown had promised revenge. Someone in the middle was about to get sacrificed to make it all look clean. That someone was my traitor. I finished my coffee. You don't stop betrayal by confronting it. You stop it by letting it finish and documenting the damage. I made 1 call, not to threaten, not to warn, just a reminder. Keep doing what you're doing, I said into the receiver. Don't rush. The voice on the other end tried to sound calm. Failed, you sure? He asked. I smiled. That's the problem, I said, you're not. I hung up before he could say anything else. By afternoon, the city started choosing sides without realizing it. Meetings canceled, couriers rerouted, doors that used to open stayed shut. Somebody made the mistake of trying to move against me openly. They sent a message through one of my oldest contacts, sloppy, emotional, an attempt to scare instead of control. I let the messenger finish, didn't interrupt, didn't react. When he was done, I said one sentence: "Tell him he's early." The messenger frowned. Early for what? For losing, I said. That night I didn't move a single piece, I let them. Because when men think they're winning, they show you everything: who they trust, who they underestimate, who they're willing to burn. And somewhere in the dark, the man who flipped started realizing something was wrong. Not because anyone touched him, because nobody did. No calls, no threats, no rescue, just silence where reassurance was supposed to be. That's when fear stops being abstract. That's when it gets personal. And by the time he understood why the quiet was worse than violence, it was already too late to change sides. Someone was going to knock first, and whoever opened that door was going to learn exactly how small their protection really was. Night came down heavy, not the kind that hides you, the kind that presses on your chest and dares you to breathe wrong. That's when the calls started, not to me, about me. Whenever people stop calling you directly, it means they're afraid of what you'll say back. I was in a place nobody would think to look. Somewhere loud enough to disappear inside, quiet enough to hear lies when they land wrong. Music low, cards slapping a table, laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Then my name drifted across the room. Not spoken, measured. I didn't turn. You never turn when people are deciding whether you're a myth or a man. The one who flipped was supposed to be protected tonight. New location, new promises, new rules. That's how they calm a guilty conscience, by wrapping it in routine. But protection is only as strong as the people providing it, and fear had already started eroding theirs. An hour later, someone I trusted leaned in close. Close enough that nobody else could hear the truth fall. They moved him, he said, didn't tell their own people why. I nodded. Means they don't trust him either. He's nervous. Good. Nervous men talk to the wrong people. Comfortable men sleep. I stood up slowly. Let the room feel it. Let the weight shift. Where? I asked. My friend hesitated. That hesitation told me something new. They changed the plan again, he said, last minute. That's when I knew the panic had reached the top. Leaders only improvise when the blueprint fails. I walked out into the street without saying goodbye. The city followed me with its eyes. Every shadow suddenly had opinions. Every doorway held a maybe. Halfway down the block I felt it. Not footsteps. Attention. Someone watching too hard. I didn't break stride, crossed the street, reflected storefront glass, caught a glimpse. Two men, not mine, not confident. They weren't there to kill me. They were there to see if tonight was the night. That meant something had already gone wrong. My phone rang once, then stopped. Then rang again. I answered on the third ring. They want him gone, the voice said. Your traitor, clean, quiet. I stopped walking. That was new. Tonight, I asked, a pause, short, afraid. Yes. I closed my eyes for half a second, because here's the thing nobody understands about power. If they kill him, they control the story. If he disappears on his own, the story controls them. Don't touch him, I said. They're not asking, the voice replied. I hung up. Across the street, one of the watchers shifted. Hand near his coat, not a gun yet, a decision that told me everything. They weren't moving against me anymore. They were moving ahead of me, which meant I had minutes, not hours. I turned down a side street and made one call, the kind of call you only make once. If I don't show by morning, I said, you know what to do. The response was immediate, solid. You sure? No, I said, but I'm certain enough. I ended the call and kept walking. Somewhere in the city, a door was about to open. Somebody was about to choose speed over loyalty, and somebody else was about to realize too late that protection doesn't mean ownership. By the time the sun came up, one name was going to vanish. The only question was whether it would be his or mine. The city doesn't sleep when blood is pending. It pretends, lights stay on, music plays late, but every real player is awake counting minutes instead of money. I reached the block where they'd hidden him and stopped short of the corner, not because I was scared, because the street was too clean. No loiterers, no noise, no casual traffic pretending not to watch. That kind of emptiness costs money. They were already there, not to protect him, to erase him. I leaned into a doorway and waited. You rush into violence, you lose control of it. You let it come to you, you decide what survives. A car rolled in slow, engine quiet, wrong plates. Two men got out, no hurry. That's how you know they'd already made peace with what they were about to do. Then the door upstairs opened. He stepped out alone. That surprised me. No escort, no reassurance. Just a man who'd realized the promises stopped working. He looked thinner. Guilt does that, or fear, sometimes both. He scanned the street, saw the car, and froze. That's the moment betrayal understands the price. I could have walked away. Let the machine finish him. Let his name become a warning without my fingerprints. But power isn't about letting things happen. It's about deciding which version of the truth gets remembered. I stepped out of the doorway, didn't raise my voice, didn't rush. He saw me and his knees almost gave out. "Boss," he started. I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. "You already spoke." The men by the car noticed me now. One reached inside his coat, the other hesitated. That hesitation saved his life later. "This ain't your business," one of them said. I smiled. "That's where you're wrong," I replied. "It's always my business when somebody lies using my name." The traitor looked between us, realizing he was standing between two versions of death. He chose the one that knew him. "They told me you were done," he said, voice breaking. "That you'd lost control." I stepped closer, slow, calm. "Control ain't loud," I said. "That's why you missed it." The men moved. I didn't, because I knew something they didn't. When fear gets this thick, somebody higher up is watching how it ends. And sure enough, headlights flared at the far end of the block. Another car, black, windows dark. The kind that doesn't arrive unless the outcome matters. The two men froze, so did everyone else. A door opened. Someone stepped out I hadn't seen in years. Older, sharper. Still dangerous. He looked at the traitor, then at me. "Problem?" he asked. I answered without looking away from the man who'd sold me out. "No," I said. "Resolution." The older man studied the scene, the street, the silence, the balance of power shifting under his shoes. He nodded once. "Handle it," he said. Then he got back in the car. That was permission. The traitor started crying, real crying, the kind that comes when hope finally runs out of places to hide. I leaned in close enough that only he heard me. "You should have asked what side I was on," I said, "before you sold it." I stepped back. What happened next didn't need witnesses, just memory. By the time the street started breathing again, one man was gone, not dead, worse, unprotected. And in this city, that's a sentence nobody survives for long. I walked away before anyone remembered to be brave. Behind me, alliances were already rewriting themselves, because tonight proved something important. I wasn't cornered, I was letting people line up, and the next name on that list didn't know yet that he'd already been chosen. By morning, the city had corrected its posture, not relaxed, adjusted. That's what happens after a near miss. People don't calm down, they recalibrate. They replay every word they said the night before and wonder who remembers it. I woke up somewhere nobody could trace. Same clothes, same calm, different balance. The man who disappeared hadn't been reported missing yet. That takes time. First comes denial, then confusion. Then the quiet understanding that asking questions is more dangerous than living without answers. Phones rang again. This time they rang toward me. I didn't answer most of them. You don't rush back into the center after a tremor. You let the cracks show. By noon, 3 separate offers came in. Peace offerings disguised as business proposals. Smiles wrapped around apologies that never used the word sorry. That told me the same thing from 3 different mouths. They were scared of what I didn't do. When violence is obvious, you can negotiate around it. When restraint shows up where cruelty was expected, people panic. Midday, I finally took one call, not from a rival, from someone who'd stayed quiet too long. "You proved your point," the voice said, older, controlled. The kind that never raises volume because it never has to. Let's not turn this into something messy. I looked out the window at a street pretending to be normal. Messy for who? I asked. A pause. That pause was confirmation. Things moved without full consent, he said. Mistakes were made. I smiled to myself. Mistakes are what men call betrayal when it fails. And now, I asked. And now, he said carefully, we reset. Names get cleared, lines get redrawn. There it was, the offer to freeze the board exactly where I stood. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, I said, you're missing one thing. What's that? The man who thought he could replace me, I replied. He didn't act alone. Silence stretched, then softer, you want compensation. I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. I want understanding, I said, from the top. Another pause, longer. That may take time, he said. That's fine, I answered. Time's already working for me. I hung up. Across the city, people started distancing themselves from certain names. Meetings postponed, invitations rescinded, protection quietly reassigned. The man at the center of it all, the one who'd given the nod without speaking, hadn't reached out yet. That bothered me. When the highest seat goes quiet, it means a bigger decision is being weighed. That afternoon, I received a message with no return number and no signature, just an address. No threat, no explanation. That's how you know it's serious. I stood up and put on my coat. Because when power finally invites you into the room, it actually uses. It's never to apologize. And whatever waited behind that door was going to decide whether this city moved forward with me in it. Or decided it was time to test what happens when the board tries to flip itself. The address led to a building that didn't advertise itself. No sign, no doorman, no reason for anyone honest to be there. That's where the real decisions get made. I didn't bring anyone. Bringing people means planning for a fight. I wasn't here to fight yet, I was here to listen. The elevator took its time. Old cables, slow climb, gives everyone a chance to reconsider. I didn't. When the doors opened, there was only one light on at the end of the hall. One door open, one chair waiting, no guards in sight. That's confidence. I stepped inside. The man sitting there had aged well. Not in the face, power ages the face, but in posture, still straight, still balanced, still certain the floor belonged to him. He didn't stand. Neither did I sit, he said. I did. For a long moment we just looked at each other. Two men who understood that this conversation would never be repeated accurately. You caused instability, he said finally. I nodded. No, I revealed it. His mouth tightened. Not disagreement, annoyance. You embarrass people who don't forgive that. I leaned forward slightly. Then they should have protected their investment better. He exhaled through his nose, a controlled release. He was deciding whether I was still useful. You disappear men, he said. That makes partners nervous. I shrugged, so does betrayal. That landed. He tapped the table once. You're standing in a narrow space. Always have been, I replied. That's why I don't fall. Another pause, then he asked the real question. What do you want? There it is. The moment everyone pretends isn't about survival. I want the city quieter, I said. Less improvisation, less amateurs playing with grown men's money. And your role, he asked. I met his eyes. I don't need titles, I said. I need room. He studied me like a chess problem he couldn't solve by force. Room comes with expectations, he said. Good, I replied. So does pressure. Silence stretched again. Outside, somewhere far below, a horn blared. Life reminding us it didn't care who won. Finally, he stood. That meant the meeting was over. You'll get your room, he said, for now. For now is how wars stay polite. As I turned to leave, he spoke again. Understand something, he said. If the city tilts again, I won't ask who started it. I stopped at the door, didn't turn around. You never do, I said. That's why it always finishes. I walked out. The elevator ride down felt longer, not because of fear, because I knew this wasn't the end of the conflict. It was the agreement on how the next one would be fought. Outside, the street looked normal again, too normal, like a smile held too long. I lit a cigarette I didn't plan to finish and took one drag. Somewhere out there, someone was already testing the edges of the new silence. And sooner or later, they'd forget why it existed. That's when I'd remind them. Silence never lasts, it stretches, it thins. Then someone leans on it too hard and it snaps. 3 nights after that meeting, the city tried to breathe like nothing had changed. Clubs filled, dice rolled. Men laughed too loud like volume could erase memory. That's when I knew somebody was getting bold. I was sitting alone, same window, same angles, when a message reached me through a voice that didn't usually shake. "They're skimming," he said. "Small numbers, testing." I didn't react. How small? I asked. Small enough to look accidental. That's the most dangerous size. People think betrayal has to be dramatic. Big moves, big money, big noise. But real takeovers start quiet, shaving edges, seeing who notices. Someone was checking whether my room had walls. "Let it run," I said. A pause. "You sure?" "Positive," I replied. "I want to see who gets greedy first." That night I moved through the city without touching anything. No calls, no corrections, no warnings, and just like I expected, the wrong people got comfortable. A courier skipped protocol. A meeting happened without notice. A name that shouldn't have been spoken got spoken twice. Patterns started lining up again. By dawn, I knew who was behind it. Not a rival, not an outsider. Someone who'd been in the room when silence was negotiated. That's the part nobody prepares for. When the threat isn't ambition, it's impatience. Men who think time dulls consequences. I didn't confront him, I invited him. Neutral ground. Public enough to feel safe, private enough to matter. He arrived early, another mistake. "Figured we should talk," he said, smiling like this was business as usual. "It is," I replied, "just not for you." His smile hesitated, just a fraction. "You hearing things?" he asked. I leaned back. "I'm seeing them." He laughed a little too fast. "Come on, everybody's taking a little more these days." I nodded slowly. "That's how floods start." The laughter stopped. "You threatening me now?" he said. I shook my head. "I'm giving you time to remember where you're standing." He stood up. So did I. For a second I thought he might say something smart. He didn't. "I'm protected," he said. "You know that." I looked at him, really looked. At the confidence, at the misunderstanding. "Protection ain't permanent," I said. "It's rented." His jaw tightened. I stepped closer. Low voice. "No witnesses needed. You already spent your grace," I told him. "You just don't know it yet." I walked away first. That matters. Behind me I felt it, the shift. The realization settling in late. By the time he understood what he'd done, the silence would already be gone again. And the next time the city tightened its grip, it wouldn't be to negotiate, it would be to choose. By the end of that week, the city stopped pretending. You could hear it in the pauses between sentences, see it in the way men checked rooms twice before sitting, feel it in how money moved slower, like it was scared to be noticed. That's when I knew the silence had officially expired. The man I warned didn't disappear right away. That's important. When power wants you gone, it doesn't rush. It waits to see who panics first. He didn't. He tried to outlast the pressure. He missed the point. Pressure isn't about speed, it's about direction. 2 days after our talk, one of his longtime protections pulled out. No argument, no explanation, just wasn't there anymore. The next night, a shipment meant for him got lost. Found later untouched, sitting in a place nobody claimed. That's not theft, that's a message. He finally called me just after midnight, didn't threaten, didn't posture. "Something's wrong," he said. I let the silence sit long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Things feel off," he added. "That's because they are," I replied. "You told them?" he asked. I smiled to myself. "No," I said, "I didn't have to." His breathing changed, shorter now, careful. "So what do I do?" he asked. There it was, not confidence, not protection, permission. "You already chose," I said. "Now you wait." "For what?" "For the part where you find out who still answers your calls." He hung up without saying goodbye. That's when I knew it was close. The next morning, the city woke up to a rumor that didn't have a source. The kind of rumor that feels older than the day it's spoken. Someone high up was tired of improvisation. Someone was cleaning house. and someone had volunteered without knowing it. By afternoon, the man I warned couldn't get a meeting. By evening, he couldn't get a car. By night, he couldn't get a door to open. That's when fear turns inward. I didn't move against him. I didn't need to. The city was already doing it for me. Late that night, I stood by a window and watched headlights circle the block below, slow, repeating, looking for something they hoped wouldn't resist. My phone buzzed once. No number, no words, just a time. I checked my watch. They were early, which meant someone was about to act before the board settled. That's dangerous, because when people move early, they move sloppy, and sloppy is when accidents happen. I put on my coat. Somewhere in this city, a door was about to open for the last time, and whoever walked through it wasn't walking back out the same way. The address they sent wasn't new. That's what worried me. Same stretch of pavement, same bad lighting. Same corner where deals got made and buried without paperwork. When people reuse a location, it means they're leaning on habit instead of thinking. Habit gets people hurt. I didn't arrive on time. I arrived early. Watched the place breathe before anyone knew it was being observed. A car idling too long. A shadow that shifted when it shouldn't have. The city always tells you who's nervous if you listen with your eyes. The man I'd warned showed up 10 minutes late, alone. That was the loudest thing he could have done. He looked smaller than before, not physically, spiritually, like someone who'd finally realized protection isn't armor, it's permission that can be revoked without notice. He saw me and tried to smile. Didn't work. "You said wait," he said. I waited. I stepped closer, close enough that the night had to choose which of us to listen to. "And now?" I asked. He swallowed. "They're coming." Of course they were. When men at the top decide something needs to end, they don't negotiate, they delegate. "You tell them where I'd be?" I asked. "No," he said too fast. That told me yes. Headlights flared at the far end of the street, not rushing, confident, like they expected the ending to cooperate. The man's hand started shaking. "You can still fix this," he said. "You still got weight." I looked at him for a long moment. "This is me fixing it," I said. The car doors opened. 2 men stepped out. Then a third, professional posture, empty faces, not here for conversation. They stopped when they saw me. That hesitation was important. One of them spoke. "This doesn't concern you." I smiled just a little. "Everything tonight concerns me." They exchanged a look, calculating risk, rewriting odds. Behind me, the man who'd betrayed me took a step back. That was his last mistake. Because when you step away from the only person who understands the danger you're in, you make yourself the solution. I didn't touch him, didn't have to. The older man from the black car emerged from the shadows. Same calm, same authority. The one who'd given permission without words. He looked at the scene, at me, at the man who thought he could play both sides. Then he spoke. "This ends now." The traitor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I met the older man's eyes. "Clean?" I asked. He nodded once. That was all. I turned and walked away before the sound behind me finished forming. Didn't look back. Didn't slow down. Because real power doesn't need to witness consequences. It creates them. Then leaves the city to explain itself. By morning, one name would be spoken in the past tense. By night, someone else would start wondering how close they were to being next. And somewhere deep in the city's bones, a new silence would settle in. Not peace, a warning. And warnings don't stay quiet forever. Morning came with clean skies and dirty whispers. That's always how it happens. After the noise, the city washes its face and pretends nothing bled overnight. The name traveled before the sun finished rising. Not shouted, not announced. Passed mouth to ear like something fragile, past tense. People reacted the way they always do when the lesson lands too close to home. Some acted surprised, some acted relieved. Most acted like they'd known it was coming all along. Liars age well in this business. I didn't make any calls, didn't need to. By noon, the board had shifted on its own. Routes realigned, meetings canceled for now. Men who'd been loud all week suddenly found religion in caution. That's respect returning, not the loud kind, the careful kind, but something else came with it. Curiosity. Whenever a storm passes without destroying everything, people start wondering how strong the foundation really is. Who held it? Who cracked it? Who might try again with better timing? I felt that curiosity like eyes on my back. That afternoon, someone tested me without realizing it was a test. A small thing, a delay where there shouldn't be one. A favor returned wrong, subtle, meant to see if I'd react emotionally. I didn't. That answer travels fast. By evening, I got a visit I hadn't expected. A woman, sharp eyes, smarter than the men who sent her. She didn't sit until I told her to. "You've changed the temperature," she said. "No," I replied. "I reminded it who controls the thermostat." She smiled despite herself. Dangerous, controlled. People want to know what comes next. I looked past her out the window at a city that never learns but always remembers. "Next," I said, "is quiet, until someone mistakes it for weakness." "And if they do?" she asked. I turned back to her. "Then we start a new lesson." She stood, hesitated, then spoke the part she'd been sent to say. "There are rumors," she said carefully, "that you're building something bigger." I laughed softly. "That's the oldest rumor in the world," I said. "Men say it whenever they feel small." She left without pressing. Smart. Alone again, I poured a drink and didn't touch it, watched the light shift across the floor. Somewhere out there, someone was already telling themselves a story. That they'd be different, smarter, faster, that they'd figured me out. They always do, and that's how the cycle survives. Because the city doesn't fear power forever, it forgets. And when it does, I'll already be watching the next door that closes too quietly. The city settled into its lie. That's what calm really is here. A pause where everyone pretends the rules are permanent. I let it breathe. Days passed. No moves from me. No corrections, no reminders. That's when the bold ones start whispering to themselves that maybe the story's over. It never is. I noticed the shift on a Tuesday. Those are dangerous days. Nobody's sharp. Everyone's thinking about what they didn't finish yesterday or what they'll rush tomorrow. A name crossed my desk that shouldn't have. Not loud, not important, just curious. A man asking questions in rooms he hadn't earned access to, listening too closely, smiling too easily, acting like someone who believed silence meant permission. That belief gets people buried. I didn't dig into him. I dug around him. And what I found wasn't ambition. It was instruction. Someone above him. Someone patient. Someone who'd watched everything I'd done and decided not to challenge it head on. That's the real danger. Not enemies, observers. That night I stood by the window again. Same angle, same street, different feeling. A car passed twice. Too smooth, too clean, no panic in it. That's when I understood. This wasn't about replacing me. It was about studying me, learning where I applied pressure, where I waited, where I let things burn on their own. Someone was building a mirror. My phone buzzed once, a message with no name. "You still think the city needs you?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back one sentence. "It does. You're just late to understanding why." No reply came, but the air changed. Somewhere out there a new game had started, quieter, smart. Patient enough to wait for me to blink. I didn't. I smiled, because whoever was watching had already made their first mistake. They thought I was guarding territory. I'm guarding timing. And the moment they decide to step out of the shadows, they're going to learn the same thing everyone else eventually does. The city doesn't choose who survives. I do. You can always tell when someone thinks they're smarter than the room. They stop hiding, not fully, just enough. The observer made his second mistake 3 days later. He sent a message through the wrong channel. Polite, professional, curious in a way that wanted to sound harmless. He wanted a meeting, not to threaten, not to bargain, to understand. That's arrogance dressed up as intelligence. I didn't answer right away. Let the message sit. Let him imagine reasons. Men like that fill silence with confidence until it drowns them. When I did respond, I kept it simple. "Tomorrow, noon." Neutral ground, his suggestion, another mistake. When someone insists on the setting, it's because they've already rehearsed how it ends. I arrived on time. He arrived early, still learning. He stood when I approached, offered his hand. I didn't take it. We sat up close. He looked ordinary. That's what made him dangerous. No tells, no hunger showing, the kind of man who believes systems matter more than people. "I've been watching you," he said calmly. "I know," I replied. He blinked. "Just once." "You don't seem bothered." Only by amateurs, I said. He smiled thinly. I respect what you've built. I leaned back. Then don't try to reverse engineer it. Silence stretched. He was measuring whether to push. He pushed. There's a larger structure forming, he said, one that doesn't rely on personalities. That told me everything. Men who talk about removing personalities always plan to remove people. And where do I fit? I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction. You don't, he said. Not long term. I nodded slowly. That honesty would have impressed me if it hadn't come so late. You think you're inevitable, I said. That's your problem. And you think you're irreplaceable, he shot back. I smiled. No, I said. I think I'm inconvenient. That's when he realized the meeting hadn't gone the way he imagined. I stood up first. This conversation, I said, never happened. He started to respond. I didn't let him finish. And if I see you circling again, I continued, I won't stop you. His eyes narrowed. That's it. That's mercy, I said. Don't confuse it for curiosity. I walked away. Behind me I felt it, the recalculation. The moment he understood he'd been allowed close, not invited. That night the city hummed differently, not louder, sharper, because now there were two men watching the board, and only one of us had lived long enough to know what happens when patience runs out. Somewhere, a third player was already taking notes. That's the part nobody sees coming. The meeting by the South Channel didn't last long. That told me more than any spy ever could. Long meetings mean doubt. Short meetings mean decisions already made. I didn't send anyone to listen. I didn't need names yet. Names come later when they can't hide behind each other. What I needed was timing. Timing is where betrayals slip. Just before midnight, the fog thickened again. Not sudden, not dramatic. It rolled in the way an old habit returns, quiet, familiar, almost comforting. That's when the island started talking, not in words, in movement. A boat untied itself and drifted 10 yards farther than it should have. A lantern went out where it never did. Footsteps crossed a path that hadn't been used since before the war. Someone was walking like the ground still owed him loyalty. I stood at the edge of the field and waited. Power doesn't chase. Power lets mistakes arrive on schedule. A shape emerged through the fog, careful but not careful enough. A man I knew well. A man who'd eaten at my table, who de-argued law and faith in the same breath, who'd sworn he wanted the island to survive. He froze when he saw me, didn't reach for a weapon, didn't run. That told me everything. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said, forcing calm. You shouldn't be out here at all, I replied. He swallowed. They're coming at dawn, he said. Surveyors, deputies, papers signed already. And you? I asked. He looked away. I told them where the safe paths were, he said, just the ones they'd use first. The fog shifted behind him. The marsh listened. You told them where they thought it was safe, I said. His head snapped up. What does that mean? I stepped closer, slow enough not to spook him. It means you still don't understand this place, I said. You just understand maps. A sound came from the reeds, soft, almost respectful. He heard it too. You said you wouldn't turn it on us, he whispered. I didn't, I said. You did. His foot slid back half an inch. That's all it takes. The ground gave a warning tremor, the kind the island offers once if it's feeling merciful. He looked at me, panic breaking through the logic he'd been feeding himself. Please, he said. I was trying to save it. I held his gaze, voice even. No, I said. You were trying to survive it. Behind him, the fog thickened until the channel disappeared completely. And far out beyond the water, somewhere on the mainland, men were already waking up, believing dawn would belong to them. They didn't know yet that the island had already decided who would greet it, and who wouldn't. Waiting is a language, and whoever that third player was, he spoke it fluently. I didn't chase the car, didn't ask around, didn't tighten my circle. I loosened it. That's how you catch a patient man. You make the board look abandoned. 2 days later, someone I'd cut loose months ago showed back up in my orbit, not by accident. Nobody ever drifts back in without a reason. He didn't ask for a meeting. He asked for advice. That's how you know someone put him up to it. We sat where the walls listened more than people did. "I hear you slowing down," he said. I looked at him like he'd just told me the weather. "Slowing isn't stopping," I replied. He nodded, filing that away. "Some folks think the city's ready for new management." There it was, not a threat, a temperature check. I leaned in just enough to shift the air. "Cities don't get ready," I said. "They get taken." He swallowed. "You think you're still the one to do it?" I smiled. "I don't think about it," I said. "That's the difference." He left with more questions than answers, which is exactly what I wanted. That night, something finally moved. A favor got called and that shouldn't have been honored. A door opened that was supposed to stay shut. Small things, quiet things, but they all pointed the same way. The third player wasn't waiting anymore. He was measuring reaction time. I stood by the window again, watching the street pretend it didn't know what was coming. Whoever he was, he believed patience beat experience. That belief gets men confident. Confident men make one mistake they can't take back. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. No greeting, no explanation. "Keep an eye on the ones who aren't moving," I said. A pause. Then, "You think it's time?" I looked out at the city, calm on the surface, shifting underneath. "I think someone just decided to stop waiting," I said. I hung up and turned off the light. Somewhere out there, the third player was smiling, convinced he'd finally forced my hand. He hadn't. He just stepped close enough for me to see his shadow. And once I see you clearly, the waiting ends. The first real move didn't look like a move at all. That's how I knew it was his. No noise, no bodies. Just a rule that stopped applying in one small corner of the city. A payment cleared that shouldn't have. A favor got denied that always went through. A man who never waited. You don't notice that unless you're counting breaths instead of dollars. I was. By noon I knew where the pressure was coming from. Not a person, a corridor. A narrow passage where decisions passed through fewer hands than people believed. That's where he was standing. Not blocking, redirecting. Smart. I didn't touch it. Touching it would have confirmed I'd seen it. Instead, I let something else fail on purpose. A different line. One I could afford to lose. Within hours, he corrected it. Too fast. That's the tell. When someone fixes your mistake before the city complains, it means they're watching closer than they should. I leaned back and smiled. There you are. That evening, I got an invitation that didn't pretend to be polite. No location. No time. Just a sentence. "We need to make sure this doesn't turn into something unnecessary." Unnecessary is what men say when they've already planned violence but hope you'll save them the trouble. I didn't reply. Instead, I moved one piece he hadn't accounted for. Not money, not muscle, memory. I let an old story resurface. Quietly. The kind of story people remember wrong but feel right. About what happens when the city thinks it's smarter than the man who learned it the hard way. By midnight, the invitation turned into a request. By dawn, it turned into concern. That's when I knew he was closer than he wanted to be. I stood by the window one last time before sleeping, watched the streetlights hum, watched a car slow down where it shouldn't. It didn't stop. Didn't need to. Somebody inside it just needed to confirm one thing, that I was still awake. I was, because the next move isn't about patience or observation anymore. It's about commitment. And whoever makes it first is going to change the city in a way neither of us can take back. One of us is about to step out of the shadows, and the other is already deciding where that step ends. Commitment has a sound. Not loud. Final. I heard it just after dusk, when the city starts believing the day can't surprise it anymore. A channel reopened that had no business reopening. Same hands, different permission. That wasn't curiosity anymore. That was resolve. I didn't react. I adjusted my chair so I could see the door and the window at the same time. Let the moment breathe. Let him believe he'd crossed a line without resistance. 10 minutes later, a knock came where knocks don't usually come. 3 beats. Pause. 2 more. Not law, not muscle. A messenger. I opened the door halfway. Enough to be polite. Not enough to be vulnerable. "He wants to talk," the man said, eyes steady, voice rehearsed. "He's late," I replied. The messenger swallowed. "He says tonight matters." I looked past him down the hall into nothing. "Everything matters at night," I said. "That's when people show who they are." I closed the door without slamming it. That was my answer. An hour later, the city flinched. Not big, not public, just a shift in tone, like a song changing keys mid-verse. People didn't know why they felt uneasy. They just did. That's when my phone rang. No disguise this time. No intermediaries. His voice was calm, too calm. "You're forcing a decision," he said. "No," I replied. "You are. I'm just not stopping you." A pause, long enough to tell me he wasn't used to that. "You think this ends clean," he said. "I think it ends honestly," I answered. Clean was never on the table. Silence again. Then quieter. "If you don't step back, things break." I smiled. "They always do," I said. "Question is who's standing when they do." I hung up. Outside, somewhere close enough to matter, a car door shut. Slow, deliberate. A sound meant to be heard. I didn't move. Because when someone finally commits, they expect reaction. They expect fear. They expect noise. They don't expect patience. Whatever he's planning next isn't a test, it's a declaration. And declarations have consequences. By the time the city wakes up tomorrow, one of us will have crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. The only mystery left is whether he knows which one. The line got crossed before dawn, not by him, by someone who wanted credit. That's always how patience collapses. An understudy steps into the light too early. I felt it in the way my phone stayed quiet. No warnings, no noise. Silence sharpened into intent. When that happens, you don't check messages. You check exits. I stepped outside just as the street decided to lie to me. Too empty, too arranged. A car rolled past once, slow, same car, different driver. That told me he'd subcontracted the ending. That's the mistake. You never outsource something this personal. I kept walking, didn't speed up, didn't look back. Let the city choose who it wanted to watch. At the corner, a man detached from the shadow. Young, focused, hungry. The kind that believes proximity equals importance. "Hold up," he said. I stopped. Not because he asked, because I wanted to see who'd taught him to speak first. He took another step, too close, wrong distance. "You're supposed to wait," I said calmly. His eyes flickered, just a tick. That confirmed it. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to be noticed. Behind him, tires whispered. A door clicked. Someone else was arriving late to a moment they didn't understand yet. I leaned in, close enough for the truth to land heavy. "Tell the man who sent you," I said, "that this is where impatience gets people buried." The young man hesitated. That hesitation saved him something he didn't know he was about to lose. From the car, a voice called his name. Authority. Annoyed. That was the third player's voice. Finally stepping close enough to cast a shadow. The young man backed away, fast, relieved. The car door opened. He didn't get out, didn't need to. "Seems we keep missing each other," the voice said. "Only because you've been walking around the truth," I replied. A pause. Engines idled. The city leaned in. "You could have ended this earlier," he said. "So could you," I answered. "But then we wouldn't know who breaks first." Silence again, thicker than before. "You win this round," he said. I smiled, unseen. "There are no rounds," I said, "just memory." The car pulled away. No threat, no apology. That's when you know the war didn't end. It moved. Because now he knows something he didn't before. I'm not guarding territory, I'm guarding time. And the next time he reaches for it, he won't miss. By mid-morning, the city had decided on a story, not the truth, a version it could live with. People said the tension had passed, said the threat had cooled, said the night was just another misunderstanding that never fully formed. That's how cities protect themselves. They lie in unison. I didn't correct them. I let the lie settle because lies make people careless. Around noon, something came back to life that should have stayed dead. A name resurfaced. A pipeline reopened. Quiet, polite, like it had permission again. That was him, not moving openly, testing memory. I watched it happen from a distance. Watched who stepped back in without hesitation. Watched who asked questions they hadn't asked before. Fear doesn't disappear. It just changes posture. Late afternoon, I got a message from someone who never reaches out unless the ground is already shifting. "He's building around you," the message said. "Not against, around." That's the most dangerous kind. You can fight pressure. You can survive confrontation, but being circled slowly. That's how men wake up one day and realize the exits are gone. I sat with that longer than usual. Then I did the one thing he wasn't expecting. I stepped aside, not publicly, not dramatically. I let a small corner go quiet, let him move into space that felt earned. Let his people feel successful. Success makes men rush. By evening he'd leaned forward just enough. That's when I knew where he was standing, and once you know that, you don't push. You pull. I made one call, short. Controlled. Let it collapse, I said, not all at once, one support at a time. The response came back steady, loyal, understood. Night fell. Somewhere the third player was smiling, convinced patience had finally paid off, convinced he'd found a way to neutralize me without a fight. He hadn't. He just agreed to stand on something that still remembered my weight. By tomorrow, the city would feel it again. Not as fear, as imbalance. And when balance breaks, someone always reaches out instinctively. To the wrong thing, that's when I move. The collapse didn't announce itself, it never does. It started with a delay small enough to ignore, then a second one, then a phone that rang too long before anyone answered. By the time people noticed, they were already standing on air. The third player felt it first, not panic, confusion. His kind always does. When you build by calculation, you expect numbers to behave. You don't expect memory to fight back. He called once. Didn't leave a message. That mattered. Men like him don't call unless the floor has shifted under their feet. I didn't return it. Instead, I watched. Watched his people scramble to stabilize something they didn't understand was designed to fail once it forgot who put it there. Watched old loyalties wake up sore and angry. Watched favors come due with interest. By nightfall, he made the mistake I'd been waiting for. He showed himself. Not publicly, not loudly. He leaned on someone who still leaned on me. That's when the board snapped into focus. I got the call just before midnight. He wants a reset, the voice said, tired, afraid, honest in a way fear forces. I stood by the window, city lights blinking like nothing was wrong. A reset means admitting who broke it, I said. Silence. Then softer, he's willing to meet. I smiled, of course he was. That's the last move of a patient man who realizes patience ran out. Tomorrow, I said, same rules as last time. The voice hesitated. He won't like those. He doesn't have to, I replied. I hung up and finally turned off the light. Because tomorrow isn't about dominance, it's about exposure. When two men who understand timing sit across from each other, one of them always learns too late that time isn't neutral. It chooses. And by this time tomorrow night, the city is going to remember who it chose to keep standing. Morning arrived like it didn't know what it was walking into. That's my favorite kind. The meeting place was neutral in name only. Everybody who mattered knew who'd chosen it. Neutrality is just power pretending not to lean. I arrived first. Always do. Chairs tell stories if you give them time. So do doors. I sat where I could see both, and I waited without checking the clock. When a man watches the time, it owns him. He came in alone, no entourage, no performance. Just a man who'd finally accepted that strategy doesn't protect you from consequences, it only delays them. He looked different up close, not weaker, more exposed. That's what happens when the city stops buffering your mistakes. You pulled the floor out from under me, he said. I nodded. You stepped where it was hollow. A thin smile, respect, or something close to it. You could have crushed it all, he said. Instead, you let me think I was winning. That's how you find out what someone really wants, I replied, when they think nobody's watching. He leaned back. So what now? There it was again, that word men use when they're done pretending they're in control. I didn't answer right away because the room wasn't empty, not really. Somewhere outside, engines idled. Somewhere else, phones stayed face down. The city was listening, even if it didn't know which ear to use yet. Now, I said finally, you decide who you are without leverage. He frowned. That's not a decision. Everything is, I replied, when the options get thin. Silence stretched. Then he asked the question he'd been avoiding since the beginning. You going to end me? I smiled, not kind. Ending you is easy, I said. Living with what you tried to do, that's harder. He looked away first time. Outside, a door slammed. Not ours, close enough to matter. I stood. That sound. I said, That's the city reminding you it doesn't wait. He stood too, slow, careful. What if I don't agree? He asked. I buttoned my coat. Then this meeting never happened, I said, and the city finishes the conversation for us. We walked toward the door together. Not allies, not enemies, something worse. Two men who knew exactly what the other was capable of. As I reached the threshold, I felt it, that tightening again. The kind that only comes when a third variable enters the equation. Someone else had decided not to wait, and whatever move they were making. It wasn't on the board we'd been playing. Not yet. I felt it before I heard it. That subtle pull in the gut that tells you the math just changed. We stepped out separately. Always do. Together sends the wrong message. Separate keeps everyone guessing who left with what. The street looked normal. That's what made it dangerous. Normal is camouflage. I took 3 steps before the city exhaled wrong. A car accelerated where it shouldn't have. A voice rose too fast. A decision got made by someone who wasn't invited into ours. That's when the third variable showed its hand. Not him, not me. Someone else decided tonight was theirs. I didn't turn around. Turning gives shape to fear. Instead, I adjusted my pace, let my coat swing just enough to block a line of sight that didn't need to exist. Behind me, I heard it. Not a shot. Not yet. A command, sharp, young, wrong. The third player had been patient, but patience doesn't belong to everyone who borrows power. Someone under him got tired of waiting for permission. That's how chains snap. I ducked into a doorway as movement erupted down the block. People scattering, cars braking hard, chaos pretending to be random. I counted. 1, 2, 3, too many for coincidence, too few for control. This wasn't a hit, it was a demonstration. I caught a glimpse of the man from the meeting across the street, pressed flat against a wall, eyes wide. He hadn't known about this. That mattered. The third player didn't plan this. Someone tried to impress him. That kind of loyalty is lethal. I made a call without looking at the phone. Pull everyone back, I said. Now. No questions, just motion. Because when a shadow breaks formation, it means something higher is about to fall. The street went quiet fast. Too fast. Like everyone realized at once that being present was a mistake. I stepped back out, slow, visible, calm. That's when the real danger reveals itself. When calm walks through noise untouched. Somewhere nearby, someone was watching, waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. Instead, I looked straight at the darkened windows above the street and spoke softly, knowing someone would hear. You just told me who you can't control, I said. That's expensive. No answer came, but the air tightened. Because now the game had changed again. This wasn't about patience anymore, or timing, or memory. This was about containment, and whoever failed at it first was going to bring the whole structure down with them. Containment is where empires choke. You can hear it when the walls start closing in on themselves. Orders get shorter, trust gets rationed. Everybody's waiting for permission that isn't coming. I walked 2 more blocks before anyone tried to follow me. That told me plenty. Whoever broke formation wasn't acting alone, but they weren't protected either. The third player had lost grip of his leash, and everyone could feel it snapping back. That's when mistakes multiply. I stopped under a streetlight that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. Looked at my reflection in a dark window. Same face. Same calm, different phase. My phone buzzed once. A picture, grainy, shot from above. The man who tried to impress his boss sitting in a car that wasn't his, hands shaking. Confidence gone. He'd realized too late that initiative without cover is just exposure. A second message followed. He's asking for you. I didn't reply, because when a man asks for you instead of his protection, it means the ladder behind him just vanished. 10 minutes later, another call came in, this one from higher ground. You didn't need to escalate, the voice said. I smiled. I didn't, I replied. You did when you stopped controlling your people. Silence, then careful, this can still be contained. That depends, I said, on how much you're willing to lose to prove you're still in charge. He exhaled, slow, heavy. You always do this, he said, turn pressure into leverage. No, I corrected. I turn impatience into confession. I hung up and kept walking. Behind me somewhere, a decision was being made that couldn't be undone cleanly. Someone was about to sacrifice a piece to save the illusion of control. That's the oldest move there is. The question wasn't whether it would work. The question was whether they'd choose the right piece. Because if they did, the city wouldn't just remember this night, it would learn from it, and learning changes everything. The sacrifice came faster than I expected. That told me fear had climbed higher than pride. I felt it in the way traffic rerouted itself without reason. In how a familiar corner suddenly went dark like someone reached up and turned off a star. The city doesn't do that unless it's bracing. My phone rang. Different tone, different weight. "They're cutting him loose," the voice said. "Right now." I stopped walking, not because I cared about the man, because I cared about what cutting him loose meant. "They doing it loud?" I asked. "No," the voice replied. "They're making him disappear clean." Clean is a myth. Clean just means quiet enough to lie about later. I nodded to nobody and kept moving. This was the part people misunderstand. They think when your enemies eat their own, you celebrate. You don't. You pay attention, because it tells you exactly how scared they are of what comes next. I turned down a street I hadn't walked in years. The kind of street that remembers footsteps. Halfway down, I felt it again. Eyes not sloppy, not curious, measured. Someone was watching to see which way I'd turn. I turned the wrong way on purpose. Let them think I was headed somewhere obvious. Let them relax into the idea that the night was narrowing instead of widening. Then I doubled back through a cut that only locals remember and stood still. The watcher passed without seeing me. That's when I knew the sacrifice wasn't enough. The third player had bought himself time, but not forgiveness. And time, when it's borrowed like that, comes with interest nobody wants to pay. I got another message. No words this time, just a location, not a request. A consequence. I stared at it longer than I should have, because that location wasn't about the man they were erasing. It was about me. They weren't trying to clean up anymore. They were trying to close the chapter. I put the phone away and looked up at the sky, dark and patient. Somewhere ahead, a door was about to open again. Not for conversation, not for negotiation, for something final. And the people who thought tonight would end with a single sacrifice were about to learn the oldest lesson in this city. You don't end a story by cutting out a page. You end it by confronting the narrator. And I was already on my way. The footsteps didn't rush. That's how you knew they mattered. Fast men are sent. Slow men arrive. The door opened all the way this time, no hesitation, no apology to the room. Whoever walked in understood something everyone else had forgotten. This wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a reckoning. I didn't turn around right away. Let the weight settle. Let everyone else feel the shift before I acknowledged it. The third player stiffened. Just a fraction, enough. That's when you know the ceiling just lowered. "Close the door," the new voice said, not loud, not angry, certain. The door closed, no one moved. The man stepped forward into the light, older than most of them, quieter than all of them, the kind of presence that doesn't need introductions because it already lives in people's decisions. He looked at the third player first, not with anger, with disappointment. "You moved too early," he said. The third player opened his mouth, closed it. "Tried again. I was handling it." The older man shook his head once. "You were rushing," he said, "and rushing makes noise." He turned to me. For a moment, the room waited to see if this was where the balance finally tipped. He studied my face like he was checking a watch he trusted more than calendars. "You still standing?" he said. I nodded. "Still breathing too." A few men shifted. Someone exhaled. Somebody else realized they'd bet on the wrong outcome. The older man faced the room. "This ends now," he said. "Not with blood, not tonight." The third player stiffened again. "You said." "I know what I said," the older man cut in, calm, surgical, "and I changed my mind." That's when it landed. Not on the third player, on everyone who had followed him. Because when the top changes its mind, loyalty becomes liability. The older man turned back to me. "You'll have your room," he said. "Bigger than before, quieter." I didn't smile. "And him?" I asked. The third player looked at me then, really looked. For the first time, the older man paused, long enough for fear to bloom. "He won't be a problem," he said finally. That answer wasn't mercy, it was exile, which lasts longer. The meeting dissolved without anyone saying it was over. Chairs scraped. Men avoided eye contact. Decisions rewrote themselves on the walk to the door. I stayed where I was. The older man stopped beside me on his way out. "This city," he said quietly, "eats men who think they understand it." I met his eyes. "That's why I never try to own it," I said. "I just listen." He nodded once. Then he was gone. When the door shut behind him, the room felt smaller, emptier, like something had been removed that couldn't be replaced. I walked out alone. Outside, the city breathed again, careful, adjusted. Somewhere, a man was packing his life into boxes without knowing where he'd end up. Somewhere else, someone younger was already watching, already learning the wrong lessons. And I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of the game. It was just the part where everyone finally understood. Who was allowed to keep playing. The city didn't celebrate. That's how you know the decision mattered. When something really shifts, there's no applause, just a collective adjustment, like a spine straightening after years of bad posture. I walked for a long time without direction. Let the night cool off the room I just left. Power clings to you if you don't shake it loose. Makes you heavy, makes you predictable. I don't like either. By the time I stopped, I was standing where the lights thin out and the streets start remembering older rules. The kind written before anyone thought they could control everything with meetings and leverage. That's when I noticed the gap. Not someone following me. Someone not. A presence I'd grown used to. One of the quiet watchers who'd been circling since this started was gone. That's never an accident. People don't stop watching unless they've been told to. Or they're watching from somewhere else. My phone buzzed. No message, just a missed call from a number that shouldn't exist anymore. The third player. Exile doesn't silence everyone. Some men treat it like an invitation to burn everything they can still reach. I didn't call back. Instead, I listened. A siren far away. Too far to matter. Footsteps that weren't meant for me but passed close enough to register. Somewhere, a door slammed with more force than necessary. That's when I felt it again, that tightening, that shift. The game wasn't resetting, it was fragmenting. And fragmented games don't end with agreements. They end with people acting alone, convinced history will forgive them. I stood still and let the night pass through me. Because if the third player was reaching out now, it meant one thing. He wasn't asking for mercy, he was warning me about something he'd already set in motion, whatever he'd lit. Wasn't aimed at me directly, which meant it was aimed at something I cared about. And that's when patience stops being a virtue. When a man warns you after he's lost, it's never out of kindness. It's insurance. I didn't chase the call. I chased the absence it created. You don't look for the fire, you look for what stopped burning. Two places went quiet at the same time. Too clean, too coordinated. That's not coincidence. That's a message written in negative space. I changed direction without thinking about it. Thinking slows you down when the clock's already loud. On the way, I passed a storefront I'd kept open for years. Not because it made money, because it made sense. Tonight, the lights were on, but nobody inside moved. That's a bad sign. I stood across the street and watched, counted reflections, listened for the kind of silence that hums because it's full of people holding their breath. Then I saw it movement in the back. Careful, not scared, professional. This wasn't a hit. This was a search. They weren't here to break things. They were here to find something that would break me. I made a call without taking my eyes off the door. "Lock it down," I said. "Everything that still remembers my name." No questions, just motion. The door opened. One man stepped out, not armed in a way that mattered. He scanned the street, saw nothing, and relaxed half an inch. That half inch was the mistake. I crossed when the light changed, didn't rush, didn't hide. Let him see me at the last second so he'd know it wasn't luck. He froze. "Who sent you?" I asked, calm as a ledger. He swallowed, thought about lying, decided not to. "He said you wouldn't come," he said. "Then he doesn't know me," I replied. The door behind him cracked open. Another face appeared, then another. They were inside my memory, not my business. That's when it clicked. The third player didn't light a fire. He opened drawers. He was trying to turn my past into leverage. I leaned in close enough for the truth to settle. "Tell him this," I said. If he wants to talk about what I built, he better remember who taught it to breathe. I stepped back. They didn't follow, smart enough to know when a room has already decided. I walked away before the knight could argue, because now I understood the warning. This wasn't about tonight, or territory, or control. It was about legacy. And someone had decided to test whether mine was strong enough to survive being touched. That test never ends clean. He didn't announce the move. That's how you could tell it mattered. When a correction needs witnesses, you make noise. When it needs permanence, you let it arrive quietly and sit heavy. This one wasn't about fear spreading fast. It was about memory setting deep. The man who wanted to be seen woke up that morning feeling watched before he even opened his eyes. Not the paranoid kind of watched, the accurate kind. The kind that tells you something already happened while you were sleeping. His phone still worked. That was the trick. Messages came in. Meetings stayed scheduled. On the surface, nothing had changed. Underneath, everything had. A driver canceled last minute with no explanation. A location he'd used twice before suddenly wasn't available anymore. A name he leaned on for introductions sent back a polite excuse instead of an address. Polite is dangerous. Polite means someone already spoke for you. By afternoon, he started making calls he didn't need to make, checking relationships that should have been solid, fishing for reassurance without asking for it directly. He didn't get any. That's when he understood he wasn't being opposed, he was being placed. The city had decided where he belonged, and it wasn't where he was standing. Across town, the older man moved through his day the same way he always did. No rush, no deviation. But his attention was focused now, narrowed. This wasn't maintenance anymore. This was instruction. He didn't target the man's money first. That would have been too obvious. He didn't touch his muscle either. Muscle gets nervous and loud when it feels threatened. He went after belief. People stopped repeating the man's ideas, stopped defending his vision when he wasn't in the room, stopped using his name as shorthand for momentum. That's how power actually dies. Not when you're attacked, but when you're no longer quoted. By nightfall, the man felt the pressure close in, not from one direction, from all of them, like walls slowly leaning without touching yet. He sat alone in a place that used to feel safe, staring at a board full of plans that suddenly looked childish. Every move assumed cooperation that no longer existed. Every path depended on doors that had quietly disappeared. He poured a drink he didn't finish. That's when the message came. Not a call, not a threat, just a location. No time attached, no signature. He stared at it too long. This was different from before. No ambiguity. No illusion of choice dressed up as patience. This wasn't an invitation to negotiate. This was confirmation that the city had finished counting. He knew better than to ignore it. Men who ignore messages like that don't stay available long enough to regret it. So he stood, adjusted his jacket, looked at his reflection like it might explain where he went wrong. It didn't. Outside, the night felt heavier than usual. Not hostile, certain. Somewhere else in Harlem, the older man paused mid-step. He felt it settle. The moment when a man realizes the game he thought he was playing ended before he learned the rules properly. This next part wouldn't be loud, but it would be unforgettable. Because when Harlem decides to be seen, someone always pays for the clarity, and the man walking toward that address was finally close enough to understand what that meant. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, not rushed, not hesitant. That's how you know someone believes the ending already belongs to them. I didn't turn. Turning gives the moment weight it hasn't earned yet. I kept my eyes on the young man holding the folder like it was a weapon. "You should put that down," I said. He didn't. That told me everything about how this night was going to go for him. The door opened. The third player stepped in, finally choosing to exist in the same space as the consequences he'd been sending ahead of him for weeks. He looked tired now. Not old, worn. Like someone who'd been carrying a plan too long without rest. He surveyed the room, the files, the silence. Then his eyes landed on me. "So this is where you keep it," he said. "The myth." I nodded. "No, this is where I left it behind." He smirked. "You think that makes you clean?" I stepped closer, slow enough to make him feel it. Clean is what people chase when they're scared of being remembered, I said. I'm not. The young man shifted. The folder trembled in his hands. The third player noticed. That's when he realized something was off. You told him this mattered, I said quietly. You told him it could change things. His jaw tightened. You taught people to listen, he replied. I just taught them to look closer. I smiled. And that's why you lost control, I said. Because you confused exposure with power. Outside, another car pulled up. Then another, not sirens, not noise, just presence. The third player glanced toward the sound, just once. That was enough. You don't get to end this your way, I said. Not here, not with my past. He laughed sharp, defensive. You think you won. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. I think you ran out of time, I said. Behind him, the young man finally lowered the folder. The room had chosen. The third player exhaled slowly, like someone realizing the ground had been gone for a while and he'd just noticed the fall. This city eats men like us, he said. I nodded. Only the ones who think they're above it. Silence settled again. Heavy, final, nobody moved. Because now everyone understood the truth that had been circling this whole time. This wasn't about who would win. It was about who would still be standing when the city finished remembering what it owed. And what it never forgave. The night wasn't over, but the game had just changed its rules. Rules don't change loudly. They change when the room stops asking who's in charge. Nobody spoke. That's when I knew the third player finally understood what he'd walked into. Not a trap, not an ambush, a conclusion. He looked around again, slower this time. Took inventory of faces that wouldn't meet his eyes anymore. Counted how many of his assumptions had quietly stepped away. You planned this, he said. I shook my head. I anticipated you, I replied. Big difference. Outside, engines went quiet one by one, not leaving, settling. The kind of stillness that tells you movement has been replaced by decision. The young man backed away from the files like they might bite him. Smart kid, too late but smart. The third player took a step toward me, careful, measured. You know they won't let you keep everything, he said. They never do. I nodded. That's how I know who they are. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough to see the cracks now, the fatigue, the regret he'd mistaken for resolve. What happens to me? He asked. That question always comes last. I didn't answer right away. I looked past him, through him, at the version of the city he'd wanted to inherit without earning. Nothing dramatic, I said finally. No speeches. No revenge. He frowned. You walk away smaller, I continued, and you spend the rest of your life explaining why. That hit harder than anything else could have. Some men can survive pain. They can't survive irrelevance. A phone vibrated somewhere in the room. Nobody reached for it. The third player closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the fight was gone. This isn't over, he said, habit more than threat. I leaned in just enough to correct him. It is for you, I said. You just don't know where yet. He turned toward the door. No escort, no ceremony. The city doesn't bother with goodbyes when it's done with you. The door closed behind him. The room stayed quiet because now there was space again. And space invites the next question. Who fills it? I looked at the files one last time. At the history people thought they could use against me. I left them where they were. Some things protect you better when they're untouched. As I walked out into the night, I felt it, that familiar tightening, not danger, opportunity. Because somewhere out there, someone younger was already misreading what just happened. Already telling himself he'd do it smarter, cleaner, faster. They always do. And that's how the city keeps selecting its next lesson. I didn't go home. Home is where patterns form, and tonight wasn't finished writing yet. The city felt looser now, not safer, just uncertain in a way that makes people test boundaries they don't understand. Windows stayed lit longer than usual. Conversations leaned closer. Everyone sensed a vacancy without knowing where it was. Vacuum always attracts ambition. I stopped at a place nobody thinks of as important. That's why it stays important. The kind of spot where information passes hands without ever stopping to introduce itself. Someone was already waiting, not for me specifically, for what comes next. You let him walk, the voice said, neutral, curious. I let him shrink, I replied. Walking was his idea. A pause, respect, or something close to it. You know that creates ripples. I nodded, that's the point. Ripples reveal who's been swimming naked. I leaned back and listened to the city talk through other people's mouths. Names surfaced that hadn't earned the right yet. Old alliances tried to remember if they were still valid. New ones formed too quickly, which means they won't last. That's when I heard it, my name, not spoken, referenced. That's worse. It means someone's planning around me again. I finished my drink and stood. Outside, the night had changed temperature. The kind of shift you feel in your bones before weather breaks. Somewhere nearby, a door opened that shouldn't have. Somewhere else, someone decided not to wait their turn. I smiled to myself. Because the most dangerous part of any game isn't the conflict. It's the moment after, when everyone thinks the lesson is over and stops watching. That's when the next hand reaches across the table, and judging by how quiet the city just got, they were already reaching. The reach didn't come from above. It never does. Power from the top announces itself. Power from below feels like coincidence until it is. I caught it in the rhythm, in the way messages started arriving out of order, in how two people who never spoke suddenly shared the same idea at the same time. That's coordination pretending to be instinct. Someone was organizing without permission. I sat still and let it happen, because if you interrupt a man while he's building, all you learn is that he was building. If you let him finish a little, you learn what he thinks he needs to win. By midnight, the shape of it showed itself. Not a move against me, a move around me. They were filling the quiet I'd just created, offering stability, offering reassurance, offering themselves as the solution to a problem nobody had formally named. That's dangerous. That's how regimes start. I made one call, not to stop it, to test it. A name dropped where it shouldn't have. A favor offered too easily. A door opened just wide enough to see who rushed toward it. 3 did. 1 hesitated. That was the one to watch. The others were loud ambition, temporary. They'd burn themselves out chasing attention, but the quiet one, the one who waited, that one understood timing. I ended the call and finally felt tired, not weak, just aware. This city doesn't run on muscle or money or fear alone. It runs on people who understand when not to move. And somewhere nearby, someone new had just proven they understood that lesson, which means the game wasn't escalating anymore. It was evolving. And the next time my name came up in a room, it wouldn't be as a problem. It would be as a reference point. That's when things get truly dangerous. Reference points don't sleep easy. Once your name stops being a target and starts being a measurement, every move carries weight you didn't ask for. I felt it the next morning, not pressure, expectation. The kind that hangs in the air before someone speaks, waiting to see if you'll finish their thought for them. I didn't. I let the city sit with its own questions. That's when the quiet one made his second move, not toward me. Around something I cared about. A supply line shifted, subtle, legal on paper, irreversible if left alone. The kind of move that doesn't threaten a man directly, it threatens his future leverage. Smart. Too smart to be accidental. I stood at the edge of a window and watched traffic crawl like it always had, like nothing underneath it was being rewritten. That's the mistake people make. They think stability looks loud when it actually looks boring. My phone buzzed once. No name, no greeting, just a sentence. He's asking what you'll allow. I smiled. That question tells you everything about the man asking it. He wasn't challenging me. He was calibrating. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I made a call to someone who'd stopped being relevant years ago. Someone the quiet one wouldn't think to check because ambition had already passed him by. The voice on the other end sounded surprised. "That's a name I haven't heard in a while," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm calling." We spoke briefly, carefully. No promises, just alignment. When I hung up, the city felt different again. Not tense, alert, because now there were 2 quiet men watching each other without knowing it, and that's where things get dangerous. The quiet one thinks he's filling a gap. He doesn't realize he just stepped into a corridor where echoes matter more than footsteps. By nightfall, he'll make a choice, push forward or pull back. Either way, he'll reveal whether he's building something temporary or something that needs to be stopped early. I poured a drink I didn't touch and waited. Because the next move isn't about power, it's about recognition. And once a man realizes he's been seen clearly for the first time, he never moves the same again. He chose forward. They always do. Pulling back feels like survival in the moment, but men who taste momentum convince themselves stopping is the real danger. The quiet one made his play just after dusk, when the city's attention softens and people mistake fatigue for safety. He didn't touch me. He touched the idea of me. A conversation started in rooms I don't sit in anymore. My name wasn't spoken like a threat. It was spoken like a condition. If he stays, someone said, nothing changes. If he shifts, someone else answered, everything does. That's how pressure gets framed when nobody wants to admit they're afraid. I heard about it an hour later from someone who still knows when to whisper. He's positioning himself as balance, the voice said. Not opposition. He's telling people he can manage you. I laughed quietly. Manage is a dangerous word. It assumes consent. I walked to a place overlooking the water where the city pretends it's reflective instead of restless. Lights trembled on the surface, breaking every time something passed underneath. That's power, always moving below what people can see. I made 2 calls, one to confirm what I already knew, one to set a clock nobody else heard start ticking. By the time the quiet one realized his move had been acknowledged, it was already too late to undo it. He'd stepped into visibility, and visibility demands answers. His people felt it first. Invitations slowed. Responses took longer. A meeting that should have been confirmed stayed tentative. That's the city clearing its throat. I didn't interfere. Didn't warn him. Didn't block the move. I let it breathe. Because the most instructive moment in any man's rise is the instant he realizes assent isn't resistance-free. And somewhere tonight, the quiet one is staring at a silence he didn't plan for. Wondering if it's a pause or a verdict. Silence answers before people do. By morning, the quiet one felt it, not rejection, worse, ambiguity, doors still open but nobody stepping through first. Phones answered but never decisively. Support promised, never scheduled. That's how the city tests you. It lets you hang just long enough to see if you'll panic. He didn't, I'll give him that. Instead, he reached for legitimacy, paperwork, formality. The kind of moves men make when they want to look inevitable. That was his mistake. Because inevitability only works when no one remembers who came before. I didn't confront him, I contextualized him. A single conversation in a room that doesn't repeat itself. Not about him directly, about history, about cycles, about what happens when men mistake absence for permission. By afternoon, the tone shifted, not against him, around him. People stopped asking what he planned to build and started asking how long it would last. That's the question that kills momentum. I finally received his message just after sunset. No demands, no threats, just a sentence. I think we should talk. I considered it longer than necessary. Let the pause do its work. Then I replied, only if you're ready to listen. He arrived that night, alone, same mistake the third player made. Same assumption that solitude signals seriousness. We sat across from each other. No tension, no theatrics. You're not blocking me, he said, confused. You're not opposing me. I nodded, correct. Then what are you doing? I met his eyes. Letting the city decide whether you're necessary, I said. It's still thinking. That's when he understood, not fear, recognition. The kind that doesn't raise your pulse, it lowers your voice. He leaned back, quiet again. What happens if it decides I am? He asked. I stood. Then you'll have earned it, I said, and we won't be having this conversation. I left him there with that, because the final lesson doesn't come from pressure, it comes from space. And by giving him room to exist without interference. I'd already forced the only outcome that mattered. The city decided before he did. That's always how it ends. He never made another move, not because he was blocked or scared or defeated. He simply stopped being mentioned. Momentum shifted somewhere else. Conversations found new gravity. The city absorbed him the way it absorbs most things, quietly, without explanation. That's the verdict. I didn't claim victory. Victories make noise, and noise attracts challengers who misunderstand what they're challenging. Instead, I stayed where I've always been, present, unrushed, watching. The lessons settled in without ceremony. Power doesn't announce itself when it wins. It just becomes the reference again. Weeks later, someone younger asked about him. Whatever happened there? They said. I shrugged. Nothing. That answer scared them more than the truth would have. Because in this city, nothing means you were measured and found unnecessary. I walked that night through streets that had already moved on. Same lights, same corners, different weight. The game didn't end, it stabilized. And as long as it stays that way, I don't need to move first. I don't need to move at all. Because the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one making plays. It's the one everyone quietly adjusts around, without ever agreeing to it.